All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive into a book that's basically a map of your mind.
I like that. A map of the mind.
Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Oh, a classic.
You've probably heard of it, maybe even skimmed a few chapters.
Definitely a must-read.
But we're going way beyond just the basics today. We're unearthing those hidden gems.
The real juicy insights.
The stuff that can actually change how you think.
Right, because it's not just about knowing the theory.
Exactly. And speaking of theory, we all know about System 1 and System 2.
Ah, yes, the two systems of thinking.
But I'm really curious how they play out in our messy, real lives, not just in textbook examples.
That's where it gets really interesting, right? Like, take the availability heuristic.
Yeah, the availability heuristic.
It's not some abstract concept. It's happening every time you check the news.
Or scroll through social media.
Exactly. It's how we end up overestimating certain risks.
Because they're just so available in our minds.
Like that time you saw a news report about a shark attack.
Oh, tell me about it. Suddenly I'm terrified of the ocean.
Even though statistically, it's incredibly unlikely.
It's like our brains are wired for drama.
Well, they are wired to pay attention to what's vivid and emotional.
Which makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, I guess.
Right. You'd want to avoid those threats that seem immediate.
But in today's world, it can lead us astray.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's not just about sharks and plane crashes.
It's about how that constant stream of information shapes our perception of risk.
And that can impact everything from your investments to your career choices.
You're constantly seeing news about market volatility.
You might become overly risk averse, even when the data says otherwise.
It's like our brains are prioritizing the immediate and the emotional
over the rational and the long term.
Which isn't always the best strategy.
Not always, no. And speaking of rationality, Kahneman's work also shows how easily our minds can be swayed by information that seems completely irrelevant. Like the anchoring effect. Have you ever noticed how a ridiculously high price tag, even if it's obviously inflated,
can totally mess with your sense of what's reasonable?
Exactly. It's like that initial number sets an anchor in your mind.
Even when you know it's not a fair representation of the product's true value.
Totally. And this happens in all sorts of areas, not just with money.
Like what?
Like estimating someone's age or evaluating a job candidate.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about being aware of these biases. It's about understanding how they can subtly sneak into our thinking in all these different ways.
Exactly. And one of the most intriguing things Kahneman talks about is loss aversion.
Loss aversion.
The idea that losses loom larger than gains in our minds.
Oh, so that's why losing $20 feels way worse than finding $20 feels good.
Exactly. It's like the pain of a loss is more intense than the pleasure of an equal gain.
That's so weird, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Right. It's like our brains are hardwired to avoid pain more than they are to seek pleasure.
Fascinating. So how does this play out in real life?
In countless ways. Think about negotiations.
Oh, yeah.
We're often more willing to make concessions to avoid a loss
than to push for a gain, even if the outcome is the same.
It's like we're playing defense instead of offense.
Always trying to protect what we have.
And that can make us miss out on opportunities.
That's a good point. I've never thought about it that way.
And this connects to another one of Kahneman's big ideas. Framing effects.
Framing effects.
It's how the way information is presented can drastically change our choices.
Even if the underlying options are the same.
Exactly. It's like our minds are responding to the story, not just the facts.
Like those examples with how disease treatments are framed?
Yeah, tell me about it.
You tell someone a treatment has a 90% survival rate, it sounds amazing.
But if you say it has a 10% mortality rate, it's suddenly terrifying.
Even though it's the exact same information.
It's crazy, right?
So it's not enough to just look at the numbers. We have to pay attention to how they're presented.
Absolutely. Because framing is everywhere.
It's in advertising, in politics.
Even in the way we talk to ourselves.
Our inner critic is a master framer, for sure.
Oh, definitely.
So this is all about being more aware of how our minds can be manipulated, basically.
I think it's more about understanding how our minds naturally work.
And then using that knowledge to make better choices.
Exactly. It's wild, isn't it? How our minds can be influenced like that.
It's like we have this internal PR team spinning everything.
Yeah, crafting narratives.
To fit our preconceived notions.
Oh, for sure.
So this isn't just about intellectual curiosity.
No, not at all.
It's about giving us tools to navigate the world.
To make better decisions.
To not be fooled by our own minds.
Exactly.
And speaking of tools, one of the most mind-blowing concepts Kahneman talks about is the difference between our experiencing self and our remembering self.
Oh, those two selves.
It sounded like science fiction when I first heard about it.
I know, right? Two selves, what?
But the more I think about it, the more it makes sense.
It really does.
Like, think about a vacation you've had.
Okay, vacation.
Packed with amazing experiences.
Yeah.
But it ended on a bad note.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Delayed flight, lost luggage, something like that.
Yeah.
And even though most of the trip was great.
You mostly remember the bad stuff.
I totally do.
That's your remembering self taking over.
So it's not just about maximizing every moment.
Not necessarily.
It's about understanding how our memories shape our overall happiness.
Exactly, because it's those peak moments, positive or negative,
that really stick with us.
and how things end.
The grand finale.
The duration, surprisingly, doesn't matter as much.
That's so counterintuitive.
It really is.
And it makes you think differently about how you plan things.
Oh, absolutely.
Vacations, relationships, everything.
Everything.
I'm also fascinated by the idea of priming.
Priming, yeah.
Is it really true that just being exposed to certain words or concepts
Can influence our behavior.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy, right? Like subliminal advertising.
Totally.
But the research is pretty solid on this.
So our minds are constantly making these associations.
Below our conscious awareness.
And that can impact how we act.
Even if we don't realize it.
It's kind of freaky.
It is a bit, yeah.
Like we're not really in control.
Well, we have less control than we think.
So what can we do about it?
I think it starts with awareness.
Being mindful of the information we consume.
Because it's not all neutral.
It's all shaping us in some way.
Whether we like it or not.
You know, Kahneman also talks about expertise and intuition and how sometimes even experts
It'd be wrong.
can be outperformed by algorithms.
In certain situations, yes.
That's a bit humbling, isn't it?
It is, because we tend to put so much faith in intuition.
Especially from experts.
But in complex situations,
where there's a lot of data.
algorithms can do a better job.
So are you saying we should always trust the algorithm?
Not always.
There are times when intuition is valuable.
Absolutely. Like when you're dealing with people.
But when there's no data to rely on.
Exactly. But we need to be aware of the limitations of intuition.
Especially when it's based on biases or overconfidence.
Because our gut feelings can mislead us.
So it's about finding that balance.
Between trusting our gut.
And knowing when to step back.
And look at the data.
That's where Kahneman's work is so helpful.
It helps us see the strengths and weaknesses of both.
Human judgment and algorithms.
Exactly.
So it's all about becoming more savvy decision makers.
Recognizing our biases.
Understanding the influence of priming.
And knowing when to trust our intuition.
And when to question it.
It's all part of the puzzle.
Of understanding how our minds work.
And using that knowledge to our advantage.
So it's not about becoming robots.
No, not at all.
It's about harnessing the power of both System 1 and System 2.
Working with them, not against them.
To make choices that lead to a better life.
A more fulfilling life.
A life where we're not constantly being tricked by our own minds.
I like that.
Me too. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into thinking fast and slow.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, exploring all these fascinating quirks of our minds.
All those biases and shortcuts.
But the big question is...
how do we actually use this stuff?
Exactly. How do we take these insights and turn them into better decisions in our real lives?
Well, one of the most practical things Kahneman talks about is the importance of slowing down.
Slowing down.
Yeah, when we rush into decisions, we tend to rely on System 1.
That quick, intuitive thinking.
Yeah, the one that's driven by emotions and biases.
So it's about taking a breath, engaging System 2.
The more deliberate, analytical part of our minds.
It's easier said than done, though, right?
It is, especially in our fast-paced world.
Everything's go, go, go.
But it's a skill you can practice.
Like building a mental muscle.
Exactly. Learning to pause before you react.
To think things through.
And Kahneman also gives us some specific strategies.
Oh, like what?
For debiasing our thinking.
Okay, I like that. Debias.
The technique is called reference class forecasting.
Reference class forecasting. That sounds fancy.
It's basically a way to combat the planning fallacy.
Oh, what?
The planning fallacy.
Oh, that thing where we underestimate how long things will take?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm very familiar with that one.
Like every home renovation project ever.
Seriously, always takes twice as long as I think it will.
So with reference class forecasting, instead of just going with your gut, you look at how long similar projects have taken in the past.
You gather data.
You consider the base rate of success and failure.
So you're taking an outside view?
Yes, using real-world data
Yeah.
to temper your expectations.
To avoid those nasty surprises.
Exactly, and you can use this for all sorts of plans.
Art projects, vacations.
Budgeting, anything really.
I like it. It's like a reality check for your plans.
And it can help you make more realistic decisions.
So you're not setting yourself up for disappointment.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much this all ties together.
It really does.
Understanding our biases, the influence of priming, the limitations of intuition.
It's all part of becoming more aware of how our minds work.
And using that knowledge to make better choices.
Choices that are aligned with our values and goals.
So it's not about becoming a robot.
No, not at all.
It's about harnessing the power of both System 1 and System 2
Working with them, not against them.
to create a more fulfilling life.
A life where we're not constantly being sabotaged by our own thinking.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into thinking fast and slow.
It's been a pleasure.
We've only scratched the surface of Kahneman's work
But hopefully we've sparked some curiosity.
and given you some tools to think about your own thinking.
Because that's what it's all about.
So the next time you're faced with a decision,
Big or small.
take a moment to pause
Reflect.
and maybe even channel your inner Kahneman
See what insights you can uncover.
about yourself and the world around you.
Happy thinking, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for tuning in to the Power Book of Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing community. Click the bell icon so you never miss an update. We have so much more inspiring content coming your way.